Greeting everyone once again. Last week we mainly focused on several key terms in teaching and learning vocabulary. We also looked at some of the key principles of teaching and learning vocabulary, which consists of many ways and techniques of presenting vocabulary to students and meaningful practices, meaningful repetitions, and all these sorts of things. In this week's lesson, we will take a look at the various techniques or practices for vocabulary learning and teaching that can be implemented accordingly and meaningfully by teachers. Before we get into that, let us do a quick revision on some of the key elements in vocabulary teaching and learning. Firstly, what are common, rare, and special words? Then, what is out of context technique? And lastly, what is in context technique? You may pause the video for a bit and probably recall what you understood from last week's sessions. Indeed, common words are words that exist in almost 90% of the spoken and written English. Rare words appear probably once or twice here and there. Special words, however, exist under a specific field of study, a theme, or a topic. Out of context technique is a vocabulary teaching technique in which teachers have the freedom to select words that they want students to learn, whereas in context technique requires a text. In this video, we will be introduced to the techniques for vocabulary teaching and learning and the 20 techniques that teachers can pick and choose from that are suitable for their class, their lesson, and their students. So as you can see on this slide, we have 20 techniques that we will look into, and hopefully we will finish all of these techniques in this one video. Please note that some of the techniques are already clearly explained in our course book, while some may need some examples and clarifications. So I suggest that you have your course book with you so that you can read and listen at the same time. I hope that for those who have difficulty understanding what is written in the book can find it a bit easier to grasp by watching the video along the way. So without further ado, let us get straight into the introduction of today's lesson. The first thing we all need to know is that most of the techniques here that will be discussed in this video are more appropriate for out of context vocabulary teaching and learning, which means most of these techniques work well with words that don't come from a specific text. So when using these techniques, they work well with any words or phrases of your choice. The in-context technique can be integrated when we teach vocabulary in skills such as reading or listening, but we'll discuss that when we get to it. Now, since the words we choose don't come from a specific text, using these techniques will reinforce our vocabulary teaching because we don't have to pay much attention to the grammar or other in-context elements surrounding our target words. Also, teachers can either prepare a list of words or use already learned words for most of these techniques as well, since again, they are suitable for out of context vocabulary practice. So therefore, the teachers themselves can either use their own learned words or just prepare a list of words that they want students to be exposed to in today's class. Let's get straight into our very first technique, which is called guessing new words from context. So right off the bat, This technique is not an out of context technique because it requires a text to work. Yet, it's probably the most important one for learners to have for themselves. Now, when students are taught this technique or when they acquire this technique, they can become independent learners. For they have the ability to work out difficult words on their own, which means they can learn even if their teachers are not around. And since they can learn on their own, they are able to build up their vocabulary, or at least when they read a text and come across new words, they still have an easier time understanding the text since they are able to either guess the meaning by looking at the context or by ignoring the new words completely and still have an overall comprehension of it. But why is this skill so important then? Well, I guess the obvious reason is that students become independent learners. This is especially for non-native speakers like us who don't know all the words in English. So if students have a chance to learn to work out meaning just by looking at the context around it, they can do so without having a need for a guide, because obviously they can't be with their teachers all the time. If they don't know, or at least are never taught to try this technique, they have no choice but to rely on outside elements such as a dictionary or their teacher. If they don't have access to those, what happens then? Well, obviously, in a reading text, students don't guess all the new words they come across, but those that are important enough for the overall understanding of it. But again, it will take a lot of time. So as teachers, we should try to allow them some chances to try and work out the meaning on their own by giving them the right amount of vocabulary just to help them develop that autonomous learning skill little by little. So let's look at how students can achieve this, or how we as teachers can introduce this to them. I may just show you some visuals on the slides, so I hope you have your course book with you and read as you listen. How does this work? Firstly, when students read a text or when we give them a text, they or we should encourage them to read it first. Whenever they come across any words in that text, they can decide whether they need to understand that word in order to understand that area in the text or not. So let us look at an example text that I have provided right here. The busy morning. Students may continue to read. Anya rolled over, okay, blah, 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 but haven't come across any words that hinder their understanding yet until they come across the word scurry. Now, students should then try to see if they can identify the part of speech of that word first. In this case, they may recognize that the word comes after the preposition to, so they, or the word scurry, should be a verb. Then, after recognizing the part of speech of that word, they can try and guess the meaning of that unknown word to them. To guess this, they should continue reading first. Sometimes the 5 or 10 words that come after this unknown word should be the explanation, should be the clues or even examples that either indirectly or directly help students get the gist of that word. Sometimes the context that come before the unknown word itself could also be the clues. So students should not stop immediately, looking for a dictionary, asking teacher right after they, see a new word. They should continue to read, the 5 or 10 words that come after the word that they have just come across that is unknown to them. So if you look at our example, you'll see that the phrases, the words that come after the word scurry should be a good explanation of what the word scurry is. We have, if she wanted to be ready on time, she jumped out of bed to brush her teeth, okay, wash her face, okay, she quickly dressed, right? She was in such a hurry, she almost forgot her backpack and all these sorts of things. Now, these clearly tell us that the word scurry might have something to do with, to hurry, I guess, to do things in a hurry, to rush. So these context clues help a lot with, some of the words that we come across in a text. So if students are able to just continue reading first to see what comes after the word scurry, they should have a good chance of identifying, at least knowing the gist of it as to what that word means. The first technique was a bit long since it was the most important one. From here on out, it should be a bit quicker. So let us move on to the second technique, next letter. If you are looking at your course book right now, this technique is pretty self-explanatory. It is a great technique for practicing spelling. It's great for helping students form words or recognizing patterns in word formation. So the procedure of this technique goes like this. Students have to produce a word that starts with a letter. Now you can put them in groups first of all to, start off this technique. Then you give them a phrase. And that phrase is the phrase that starts with the letter A, such as one adult or an angry baby. Now here it is up to you as to what pattern of language do you want to revise or focus on. In the examples, the teacher wants to focus on countable noun, adult, or he or she may want to touch on the use of adjective, angry, that also starts with the letter A. So teachers expect their students to produce a word that contains that element as well. Now, you ask one student to do the same thing, but this time you want him or her to think of a word that begins with the letter B now. So he or she does the same thing. That student may say, 2 blankets. Here, the word blanket is a countable noun, which is something the teacher wants to focus on. And it also starts with the letter B, which is aligned with our technique. And students also add S, since they say 2. Now, if they don't, you may use opportunistic teaching to correct them. Or they may say a beautiful baby. Here you see that the student uses the adjective correctly. And this adjective beautiful also starts with the letter B. Then the next student does the same thing, but this time they have to now do with the next letter, which is the letter C. This is exactly how this technique works. Obviously, you can integrate this vocabulary teaching technique into full sentences to help them not just come up with words, but also learn to use these in sentences at the same time. But then again, it depends on your students and your main objectives. What do you really want them to take away, from your class today? Do you want them to take away the formation of words today or the formation of sentences? So it really depends on your focus, and you need to make it clear from the start. Technique number 3 is called backwriting, which you may have heard or done before. This is pretty simple actually. It's great for spelling practice. It requires teamwork. It involves physical engagement that keeps them active. It helps them visualize, and it's pretty fun. Now, this technique works exactly like as written in our book. You have pairs of boys and girls separately. Student A thinks of a word. Now here, you can ask them to think of a new word entirely, Or you let them know that they can only use the word or think of a word that they have just learned recently or right now. It's up to you, since, it is out of context, right? The student A, thinks of a word, and then he or she uses his finger to write the first letter of that word on the back of student B. Student B then tries to guess what that word might be. They can take turn doing it and just have fun, while also meaningfully repeating the word they have learned or probably using new words. Technique number 4 is networks. And again, it's pretty simple and easy to do. This technique is wonderful for active collaborative work. It helps with critical thinking practices. It helps students with word association or creative expressions, because they actually have to creatively think of words that may not have been taught in our class before to associate with the topic. So this technique works like this. The teacher writes or draws a network and words on the board. You can ask students to do this in groups if you want them to help each other think of words that associate with the words that you give. In our example, you see that the word house branches out to lounge, to kitchen, to bedroom, to bathroom. So now students have to work together to think of words that associate with those words. For example, kitchen, students may come up with words like knives or forks or stoves. You can also look at the word bedroom, for example. Students can or may come up with words like pillows or bed. So now right here you can also use your already learned words to do this, or just have fun and give them opportunities to explore new words and build their vocabulary from here. Technique 5 is called word storm, and this technique helps a lot with recalling words or sharing words to create a list. It's quite similar to the previous technique, except this time it works like brainstorming to create a list of words. For example, students work in pairs under the topic of jobs. Now, they have to work together to take turn sharing the words they think are under this topic. Student A may say teacher, and they both write it down. Student B instead may say doctor, and they both write the word doctor down. They do this with words like, engineer, for example. And that's pretty much what this technique is about. It's about working together, sharing what you know about a topic with friends, and try to build a list of words associating with that same topic. In technique number 6, we have word square. This is probably the technique I am sure most of you have done when you, were young. As you can see in the picture, you put random letters in different rows, and the words you want them to find are hidden among those letters. They can do this in a group or pairs or even individually. It is entirely up to you. You can make it a controlled practice if you want, with the use of already learned words under a specific theme. For example, you ask them to find all the words relating to agriculture. Or you can also be more open and challenge them to find as many words as they can without making it feel like it is controlled. That way they can practice their words or be exposed to new words. Technique number 7 is called word hunting. In this technique, you might want to prepare a text that consists of the words you have already taught or probably unknown words. So let's look at the example here. We have a paragraph, a text, titled How to Make a Tin Can Telephone. To do this technique, the teacher writes definitions on the board from 1 to 5, for example. So 1, to call someone. 2, the object that keeps water or food in. Oh, by the way, make sure you use the words that are already known to students here in your definition so that they're not confused. And then students don't write the definition, but just the number, and then try to search for the words in the text they think are the words for those definitions, and then just write them next to that number. Now, if you want to challenge them a bit, you can put the definitions of those words in a random order as well. So when they go and look for the words, they have to look around a bit. Technique number 8 is called word train. This technique is also quite good for spelling practice, meaningful repetition, and it's also quite fun and competitive. It's quite simple. The teacher begins by writing down a word rain, for example, as you can see here. The next students have to continue the word using the final letter of the first word as the start of their new word. In this case, N is the final letter, so student has to come up with another word that starts with the letter N and continues from there. In our example, the student puts ET to make the word net. This continues until one student can't think of a word and therefore is eliminated. At the end, you can also ask them to identify if they see any hidden words in their long train of words, like the example in our book here. So I hope the example in the book is pretty clear. I think it's pretty clear enough, so I really don't have much to say on this technique, and I'm pretty sure you have done it before too. Technique 9 is called Find the Word Order. In this technique, you may require a reading text or a listening audio to help set it up. It helps with their receptive skills when it comes to identifying and spotting information when they read and listen. It also helps with their attention span too, actually. So in our example, we have a text. Now, the teacher writes down words hammer, empty, and string that are extracted from that text. Students now read the text and try to order the words from 1, 2, and 3 according to the order of the words they find in that text. Or, if you want to make it even more challenging for them, you can ask them to listen to an audio and then try to list down the words they hear in the order that they hear. Technique number 10 is called jumbled word. This is pretty simple, and I'm pretty sure you must have done this at least once. Basically, you may need to extract some words from a reading passage first of all. Then you prepare meanings for those words in advance. You put the meanings of the words in one column and the words in another column. Except the words are jumbled. The letters are not in the correct place. Students have to rearrange the letters, and the reading passage can help them with finding the correct spelling of that word since it is taken or they are taken from that passage. Obviously, since it requires a text, it is an in-context technique. But you can do this without a passage as well for your out-of-context technique as a challenge and as a way to introduce new words to them for fun. Technique number 11 is called guess the word. This is another practice for word association. You may select a target word you want to review, but instead of asking them to say what they have learned, you can give them clues or say words that are associated with your target word. Just like these examples here. You say the words beautiful, to grow, to live. If students have learned the word you have taught, they may be able to guess what that word is that you are trying to get out of him or her. But try not to give clues too quickly though. Say the first clue and then wait. You say beautiful and then wait. Wait for them to give you some guesses first. If none of them got it right, you give them another clue just, to challenge them a bit. There are cases where you do not have to say the words, but instead you can use full sentences. So instead of saying beautiful, you can say it is beautiful, right? Just like the example here, your target word is milk, and the clues you want to give the students are, it is white, it is good for your health, it comes from cows, for example, right? So instead of giving words, you can also say or give sentences or phrases to help them identify the target word you want to get out of them. Now in variation 2, this time the teacher will not be the one directing or controlling this revision practice, right? It's the students themselves who do it. So students work with a group or in pairs. You give student A and student B a list containing target words and clues. So instead of you doing it, you ask them to revise themselves with a partner. Student A says a clue and let student B guess. Student A says, it comes from cows. It is white. It is good for you. Student B tries to guess. When student B gets it right, student B can give him or her the clues from his or her own list. So student B now can say, it has many colors. It's beautiful. It smells good. So student A now has to guess what that word might be from that clues. Technique number 12 is called Find Word Friends. This technique is great for helping students with recognizing words that are commonly combined together incorrectly. It helps them identify words that go or collocate with one another. So the teacher plans a table. As you can see in the picture, you have all your nouns on the top and all your verbs and adjectives on the side columns. Here, students have to check the word that go together with the verbs and adjectives on the side. For example, they may check the word homework because it goes together with the word do homework. But they put a cross or question mark under the word mistake because we can't say do mistake. Or they may leave the box empty if they do not know whether the two words go together naturally or not. You can also ask them to add their own verb or adjective to see if their own words can go together with the nouns. Technique number 13 is bingo, which I am sure every one of you has heard of if not played before. The teacher writes a list of 10 words, as you can see in the example here. You can already use your learned words for meaningful practice or meaningful repetition, or you can select new words for them, for further exposure. Students then pick and choose 5 words from that list. You call out any words you wish from that list, and students cross out the word they hear. If one hears all the words they have, they say bingo. Instead, the teacher, can actually use other means to do this technique. Instead of calling out the words, you can use opposite words or meanings of the word instead. If students do not cross the word right after the meaning is said to them, it means they did not know or don't know the meaning of that word at all. It helps a lot with meaningful repetition with this activity. Technique number 14 is relay recall. Here I may need you to follow the procedure in the book with me, as it is clearly stated how it works there. Basically, it is a technique that actively engages students. It helps them move around the class and encourages memorization along the way. If you look at the slides, the teacher sticks 3 word lists on the wall around the class. You can have more than 3, of course. In pairs, the boys goes to the nearest word list. Let's say the one at the bottom, red, blue, green, yellow, purple. And then he tries to remember all the words in that list, or as many as possible if your word list is long. He comes back to his partner and then recalls or dictates the words to her. Then student B does the same thing pretty much, but finding a new word list elsewhere. Technique number 15 is called rub out and remember. It is exactly how the name suggests. In this technique, please follow the procedure with me in your book as well. It is a very good revision technique to help revise the words you have taught previously. So how does this work actually? The teacher reads out the definition of the word she wants to revise, for example. It is a fruit that is long, yellow, and it is sweet inside. So now, after hearing this definition, students who know the word will give the word, and the teacher will write the word in the circle. So she will write the word banana. She does this with a few more words. An animal that swims. Students say fish, so the teacher writes fish in the circle. A land animal that is big. Students say elephant. She writes elephant in the circle. She asks students to repeat the words, and then she erases all of those words in that circle except the circles. So now she points to the empty circle and lets students recall the word that was in that circle earlier before she erased. So here you can also ask students to write the words in the circles that they were previously in, to just help test their attention and memorization. Technique 16 is called Find the Word's Partner. This technique requires teachers to select words that can either be opposite of each other, synonymous with each other, or have the same sound. Then, teacher spreads all the words across the board and asks students to find their pair. As you can see in this example, students have to find the partner for the word tall, for example. In this case, they have to look around and try to find either the opposite of the word tall, the synonym of the word tall, or the word that has the same sound as the word tall. In this case, in our example, the partner for the word tall is the word short. Technique number 17 is true or false. It's pretty self-explanatory as well. The teacher selects the target words she wants students to practice today. In this technique, the teacher gives the definition of the word in a sentence and lets students guess whether they are true or false. Now, if you look at the example, the teacher writes 5 sentences as follows. A cat is small, a small domesticated animal often kept as a pet, a dog is a bird, blah, 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 blah. Now, students have to decide whether the definition is either true or false of that word in that sentence. So they may write, okay, number 1 is true, because yes, a cat is a small domesticated animal as a pet. Number 2 is false, because a dog is not a bird. Technique number 18 is categorizing, which is explained very clearly here in our textbook. Basically, this technique requires students to put the words in their correct class or category. If you look at the example here, the teacher writes the words sit, walk, run, die, love, try, fail, etc. And the categories students have to put those words in are good, bad, and neutral. Now they have to decide which words are bad, which words are good, which words are under the category of being neutral. Technique number 19 is same or different. This technique, as said in our textbook, gets students to compare the words and phrases to see if they are the same or different in terms of meaning. Student A has a list of words and phrases. Student B has another list of words and phrases. And now they have to try and compare their list of words and phrases starting from number 1. So student A says, not hot. Student B says, cold. So now they have to decide, both of them, that whether their words or phrases are the same or different. in terms of meaning. Technique number 20 is word building. This technique is a bit more advanced compared to others since it requires students to work with affixes. They have to know what suffixes are, prefixes are, and root or stem words are. However, if you have taught them before or are teaching them right now, it is a good way to challenge them and bring out their creativity. You can ask them to create as many words as you can, as they can, using the prefixes and suffixes and stem words that you give them. And you try to correct them if they don't use the correct affixes, or you may let them know that some suffixes or prefixes do not go with certain words. Now, these are the 20 techniques that can be great, meaningfully practices, repetitions even, for students to practice their vocabulary. However, some of these are mostly out of context, and some are great for just practices, some are great for repetitions, and some are just games and for fun. But it's up to you, the teacher. What's your goal? What's your objective? And what technique do you want to choose in order to, you know, basically just is suitable for your lesson plan or your lesson objective, right? So what techniques help you get the most out of your students?